podcast, we've talked about this too, this idea of like, as soon as we want to, make a point about something with kids, it's like, oh, well, this is not good for the kids. And that's the sticking point, right? Because as soon as you put the kids in there, then we can't say anything about it. It's the kids. We're protecting the kids. But I do think it's important to really dive in and say, is this toxic for kids or not?
Yeah.
Is this healthy for kids or not? And is that coming from our place of ignorance or discomfort? Or is that truly coming from something that is not good for children,
Welcome to the Relational Parenting Podcast. I'm Jennifer Hayes, a parent coach and 20-year childcare veteran. Each week, I sit down with my own father, Rick Hayes, and discuss the complicated issues that parents face today, as well as some of the oldest questions in the book. From the latest research and the framework of my relational parenting method, we offer thought-provoking solutions to your deepest parenting struggles. Added bonuses include intergenerational wounding discussions and guest childcare experts. We will also start taking your parenting questions in episode 5, so be sure to comment with your biggest questions or email me directly at jenny@jennyb.co. Let's get started. Veronique, also known as V, is the founder and lead educator at Ampersand Workspace. She works in race and gender, giving organizations, groups, and companies the tools to enact anti-racist and gender-inclusive values within their organizations to create a productive, inclusive culture. Veronique shapes mindsets, builds skills, and creates lasting impact through Heritage Month and Identity holiday workshops, targeted trainings, and consulting. Her business prompted V to retire from childcare, where she spent more than 20 years as a caregiver of all sorts, alongside other professional endeavors. Veronique is still very invested in the lives of all her littles around the world, and she loves them all dearly, especially since she gets to give them back to their parents. Hit record and it starts.
Great.
All right, record. We are on. Welcome back, guys, to the Relational Parenting Podcast.
Hey there.
And welcome back to
Chapter 2 with V.
Yes, Chapter 2 with V.
Very grateful to be back.
We are excited to have you back. Welcome. So in our last episode together, we dove into the discussion about race and gender and what your company does, and also like bringing up kids. And you and I have a similar background in the nannying world with over 20 years taking care of other people's babies. And you are now an entrepreneur who has your own company, and you teach other companies how to. I'm losing my words already. You teach about race and gender, and creating an inclusive work environment.
Inclusion, that's the word I had. Yeah.
And we wanted to bring you back because I just felt like we had so much more to talk about. It's so hard to cover any topic in just an hour. And so I wanted to bring you back and chat more about gender and the LGBTQIA plus community, and kind of demystify that. I know that my dad and his generation are super new or newer to understanding all the different pieces and parts, and gender identity versus sexual identity and all of these things. And so I would just love for this podcast and for you to be able to offer parents and grandparents a little more insight and a little bit more confidence in discussing these things with children as well as they're growing up.
Yeah. And I just want to start off by saying, and I always try to put this disclaimer out there, is that I'm a cisgender, straight, hetero woman having these conversations. And I know that that is not ideal, in that I don't want to take away voice from the LGBTQ plus community in any way, shape, or form. But also all the conversations that I have on these topics are like the basics. I'm not going into what their experiences are or how they might feel or think or anything along those lines, because that's secondhand to me. What I am doing is saying, like, this is what this is and this is what this isn't, and that's clear, that's fact, right? So I'm relying more on the facts and less in the experiences and less in, how, that personal lived experience of being a part of those communities. For me, it's more about like, here's the basics, here's like the foundation level, so that we aren't being offensive to those communities, so that we have
Sure.
a starting point to kind of start off our education and knowledge, and just to be able to move in that space a little bit again more comfortably. But it's not a know all be all, and I'm coming from a very straight cisgender perspective, so I do want to make that clear, and give all honor and respect to the LGBTQ plus folks who are doing this work, even though that is experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Being from the older generation, I feel like I should probably give a disclaimer too. I'm a pragmatist and and just curious, So when I ask questions or make statements, I'm out to figure out how does it work, what's the in the workplace or out in society, what's the effect. Is it healthy or not? Is the question I'm always asking myself. Is this a healthy relationship or an unhealthy relationship? Is this a healthy thing to have around your kids? And it's the particulars don't interest me that much, about other people's genders or incomes or anything. It's about the relationships for me. So
Yeah, and
I try when I stray with my language, correct me because I'm learning.
And I love how you said that, because two things really stood out to me. And one is the curiosity. I'm always telling people it's about having intellectual curiosity, and not to make people like a project or anything, right? Like something to
Yeah.
study, but more
Yeah.
so that there's this openness of like, I don't know, and I'm curious to find out. And
Yeah.
when you're curious to find out about someone and who they really are, that's how we get to know people. And that's how we get to know
Yep.
about the world. And that's how we get to
Yep.
explore the world, right? Through
Yep.
people and their experiences. So that part was really beautiful. And then, yeah, that idea of like just being open to understanding how this affects folks, and being open to being corrected, being open to learning, and even just that idea of like, is this toxic or not? Because I think, and I've talked about this multiple times, and, off podcasts, we've talked about this too, this idea of like, as soon as we want to, make a point about something with kids, it's like, oh, well, this is not good for the kids. And that's the sticking point, right? Because as soon as you put the kids in there, then we can't say anything about it. It's the kids. We're protecting the kids. But I do think it's important to really dive in and say, is this toxic for kids or not?
Yeah.
Is this healthy for kids or not? And is that coming from our place of ignorance or discomfort? Or is that truly coming from something that is not good for children,
Exactly. That's it's the value of the tribe, the value of the community is this okay, I have this opinion from based on my experience. How does that compare to everybody else's? Do I need to think about something? Am I crazy, or is everybody pretty much on the same page? Is it to use a horrible word, normal? Getting some external validation for your thinking is always good. Sometimes we get trapped in our own
Absolutely.
thinking, our own trauma, and we have to be careful about projecting that on other people.
Yeah.
Well, and our two things just came up for me. When we approach humans, any human being we come across, with curiosity and wanting to get to know them and their experience, like that is the essence of relationship. Without judgment, without criticism, without any of those pieces that come from us and our own ego, just being curious and approaching people and like in their humanness. What has been your experience of the world? What do you feel? And I don't think there's anything toxic about teaching that to children. I think that there's nothing but love and kindness behind that. And the second thing that popped up for me was the word normal. And we talk a lot about normalizing things for kids.
That's a loaded term. Yeah.
And it can be a loaded term. But I think that protecting, I think a lot of times and more lately, there's this level of like shielding children from the real world. The same people who are saying gentle parenting doesn't work are the ones who are shielding their children from real life experiences and realities. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying like take your child to like, I don't know, a drag show, or like where I'm not saying like put your 3-year-old in a dangerous situation that's like
An
not
unhealthy
age
situation,
appropriate.
maybe.
Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not age appropriate. I'm saying like there are age appropriate conversations about the way that the world works and the kinds of humans that exist in the world, and to normalize the fact that not everyone fits into this box or that box. There are millions of boxes, and people can pick and choose
yeah.
in their own flavor of life to live. And I think normalizing that for kids, whenever it begins to become something they're exposed to, or something that's, kids start talking about their body parts when they're little.
We little, yeah,
It's going to come up. And I don't think that there's anything toxic about telling your children about the world and
Yeah.
how it works.
yeah.
And letting them
So,
ask questions, right? Because even when you say like, oh,
Yeah.
we don't take our toddlers to drag shows because they can get a little risque, but there are these things that
Mhm.
are popping up all over the country about having drag queens read to kids in the libraries, and
Mhm.
just the essence of having a drag queen, someone who literally plays dress up in another gender as a
Yeah.
profession for fun because they love it, and then
yeah,
Yeah.
read books to children. The children get to ask questions about this, and
yeah,
to
Yeah.
them that's relational because they dress up all the time. They
yeah,
Mhm.
literally play pretend all the time, and they have fun with
yeah,
it all the time. So there's no
yeah,
gap here, right? Unless we put that gap in there for them,
Yeah.
unless
yeah,
we say, oh, these people are XYZ things. For the children, they're approaching this. That intellectual curiosity that I'm always trying to encourage from people all the time is something that children innately have because that's how they explore the world. That's
yeah,
how they're learning
Yes.
about the world. They're asking questions, they're trying to figure things out, and they're the most simple, basic things that we in
Yeah.
turn like have a lot of baggage around, but the children don't. And
yeah.
so,
Right.
in the last podcast, when I talked about there are age appropriate ways to talk about everything, some of that is
Yes.
removing our baggage, right? And answering that question exactly as that child asked it. It's not loaded, right? But we
Right.
perceive it as loaded
It
because of
just
our
Yeah.
baggage,
is.
because of our experience, because of all of our life lived. But they
Yeah,
don't have all of that. So that simple, plain question, we can answer that and they'll be like, cool. And then they'll keep it moving.
yeah.
Yep.
So many things are contextual. There, it's a situational ethics kind of thing where there's nothing particularly inherently evil about a lot of actions. People like to shoot guns. If you're doing it at a gun range with a group, maybe if you're hunting, depending upon your ethics there,
Mm.
being in a war zone is another thing.
Right.
Children being in certain situations with the community. For me, it all kind of goes back to the community. I have a belief that when people talk about facts, usually they're talking about agreements among people. They're not talking
Hmm.
about did
Mhm.
the litmus paper turn blue or red. It's not an objective, everybody with color vision can see this. It's
Right.
about it's about it's about community again. It's about people being able to have a framework around which to
Mm.
talk about things.
Absolutely.
And so when you catch people being, this is evil just by the fact that it exists, then there's obviously a lack of consideration of context there. I mean, when I was growing up, my parents would take me down to Ralph's pub and have dinner, and I remember some of my early memories are being in a little onesie walking around this bar. Nobody was going to give me any alcohol. There were
Yeah.
3 or 4 other families there going down and having a hamburger, up until after dinner hour. It was a family hangout, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's context. But if I just told people, well, my parents used to take me to the bar with them, well, it's
Right.
not a complete representation of the situation, and you just trigger people doing that. So
For
it's
sure.
all
Yeah.
about getting along and getting stuff done. And if my particular prejudice doesn't have anything to do with the task at hand, being healthy, raising children, getting some work done, building teams, then let's leave that outside. That's not really part of the context here. Let's be
Yeah.
professional and stuff. So anyway, that's the old farts point of view.
So I think, I think that what could be super helpful at this point would be if you would offer. My dad and I have had several off-camera conversations about definitions of different things, etc. And I think that since you are the expert at this point, out of the three of us,
Yep.
you're the one with a company that teaches others,
Yeah.
the inclusion. And so I feel like you're the best party here to define a couple of things.
Nope.
So let's see. So I would love it if you could tell us and the audience the difference between biological gender, um, social, let's see, but is it, or biological sex, social gender, and sexuality.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, absolutely can do that. So
Lovely.
often we talk about what we're assigned at birth. And so literally a baby's born, we look at their genitalia and say, this baby is a boy or a girl, right? It's what
Mm-hmm.
usually happens. And that is literally what we're talking about, is that's sex, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
genitalia, that is related to physical, sex, chromosomes, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Biological sex.
Right. But when we
Right,
talk
like
about
a plant.
identity, gender identity, that has been basically that's shaped up over time and can change. So because we, when the baby's in utero, there are tests that can show if it's a boy or a girl, even before we see that genitalia, again, based on those chromosomes. And we start automatically going along with that assigned gender and what we
Mm-hmm.
know of that gender. So if the baby's a boy, then we might dress them in blues. We might start
Mm-hmm.
buying Legos and like sports things because those are the things we associate with boys and then later men. And that's the way
Mm-hmm.
society has shaped up what that gender identity looks like. And that does have some variance across various communities, right? Like if boys can, um, like garden or not, right? Like if that was a manly thing to do
Mm.
like that. We have,
Activities linked to
right?
gender.
What was that, Patrick?
Activities linked to gender. What,
Right.
playing
So
with
some community
dolls, gardening.
ideas, right, about what that
Yeah,
looks like. But there's a general consensus about boy things and girl things, and then later man
right,
Mm-hmm.
women things, right? They go along
right,
this continuum, right?
right.
But that is based on what we bring in as society, what we've decided gender looks like as society, and again over time that's changed. So like heels, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right now we know that women supposedly wear heels, except for heels weren't created for women; they were created for men. Same with
Yeah.
wigs, right? So
Yeah.
we've seen over time this gender change throughout time, and it's literally what we decide. And so
Yeah.
if we can decide, that boys do this and girls do that, we can change that decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that's where that gender identity comes in, and that's completely and totally different to sexual identity. This idea of who I'm attracted to, who I want to be with, romantically, sexually, that looks
Mm-hmm.
completely has no relation to the actual gender itself. But we attach those things because we consider heterosexuality to be the norm. Go back to that word.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the basis. And so if is that as a society we've decided that that's the norm, then boys automatically like girls and girls automatically like boys. And then as they
Mm-hmm.
grow, then women like men and men like women. And we created this narrative, right? But that's not in relation to how people actually live, how they actually feel, and how things
Mm-hmm.
manifest. And so today we're seeing a lot, and it's always been. Let me say this, 'cause before I started this thing about like, yes, genders change over time, but also things outside of this gender binary, boy girl, has also there been people outside of that binary for forever since the binaries existed.
Forever.
Whatever the
Some
binary was like.
cultures, some cultures have other categories for that. I think there's a
Exactly.
Polynesian culture where it's like, okay, you're not a boy, you're not a girl, and
Mhm.
then there's this area that they can live in culturally.
Yeah, there are a lot of indigenous people that embrace what they call two spirit. And I'm not
Hmm.
indigenous, so I'm not going to like go into some detailed explanation of like what two spirit means. But my very basic, very, very basic surface understanding is that it is not any way related to the binary that we have. And it's way more
Mm-hmm.
complicated than that. And they had a whole different place in society.
Mm-hmm.
It was revered, right? Still is. And so there's always been people outside of the binary.
Yeah.
Now more people say, that they can put into words what that looks like, and that they feel more comfortable in a society that is more open. We're seeing more and
Mm-hmm.
more numbers of folks who identify as trans, meaning that they don't identify with what they were assigned as birth as far as gender goes.
Mm-hmm.
Or even non-binary, where that is sort of on the trans spectrum. They're definitely trans, like they're not what they were identified as birth, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
identify with anything on the spectrum. They're just them.
Yeah.
And no gender thing that exists that they feel like really captures who they are, so they're non-binary. And we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing more and more of that because they have some language terminology to put to those feelings that they're existing in, and B, we're also crafting a society that's just more open, that allows folks to be who they are. It's not easy. It's still a very radical decision in that, like, they still have to endure a lot of ridiculousness and hate, and our society is very much so still binary, but it's more open than it was in the past, and there are more people on earth than there were in the past. So
Yeah.
we're seeing more and more of those people embrace who they really are proudly, and just be what that looks like, and not in the shadows. And I think that part is really beautiful. And my work is really about trying to remove some of that strife, remove some of that oppression, that marginalization, so that more people, regardless of how they identify, regardless of what their lived experience is, can just be who they are, including in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it comes down to.
When making it safer, it's in past years, and still there are safety issues for anyone
Oh, yeah.
who is anything but a cis heterosexual person.
Period.
But it's less than it has been historically. It used to literally be a crime to be considered to be caught in homosexual acts, etc. But I think,
It still is.
Still is. Yeah.
yeah,
In
yeah.
places.
But yeah, I think that there's been a level of acknowledgement of and acceptance, and therefore safety for more people to say, hey, I've been feeling this way. Hey, I've known in my head that this is who I am, but I have never been able to admit it until now.
Mm-hmm.
Creating safety specifically in your work in the workplace, where they can fully express themselves. They don't have to hide who they are outside of
Yeah.
work, and to be able to live their whole truth no matter where they are.
And not just for that to be tolerated, right? Because there are some places where it's tolerated, like, well, we'll allow it, but for that to be celebrated and for that to be
Yeah.
included, because when we talk
Yeah.
about, and this is definitely more work related, but it applies to life. But when we talk about bringing diversity of thought into the workplace, it's all about, increased numbers, increased productivity, increased innovation, right?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
order for you to get there, it can't just be tolerated. It has to
Yeah.
be celebrated. It has to be
Yeah.
embraced. It has to be encouraged, so that we can get to that diversity of thought that really does push innovation, that really does bring in new, fresh ideas, that really does allow us to free up some of our mental brain space. And instead of putting on a mask at work, I can just commit myself fully to work, and I can just
Yeah.
be who I am. So in life, that also applies, where, we talk about, like, folks are going through things and maybe lashing out, or maybe having a moment, or maybe being slower, or all these things. But if they're having to wear a mask to go through the world, if they're having to wear a mask because they don't feel safe being themselves out in public,
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole nother layer of work and repression of yourself in a public space that
And
requires
energy.
mental space and all of that, like, other people aren't
Yeah.
dealing with. And it's
Yeah.
hard.
Loss of energy for society. It's become clear to me that there are people, the last 10 years or so, that there are people who are more and less comfortable with differences and
Mm,
change.
mm,
Not to, that roughly correlating along the conservative liberal spectrum kind of thing. That seems to me to be more about status quo, familiarity,
mhm.
and the safety. I am more and less comfortable with things that are different,
Yeah.
um, a lot of times. And
Mm,
and for me, in the workplace or around, it goes back to context. It's like, is this something I don't need to worry about someone's gender when we're trying to make software or drugs or other things? I'm worried about productivity and
mhm,
ability to communicate and be a
mhm.
valuable part of the team or the community.
Absolutely.
And race, and what, letting things that aren't material to the task at hand, whether it's building a village, protecting, depending on where you're at on the planet. If it's not material to the task at hand, if you're keeping people from contributing
Mm.
to the task at hand, then the problem is not the people you're persecuting or trying to marginalize. The problem is you're kind of dragging the society down a little bit here. Hey, let's get some work done. Take that. Do that at the bar. Do that at the campfire tonight. Right here, we're trying to dig a hole, or make a well, or
Yeah.
whatever.
And
You
just
know
like
what I
we
mean?
talked about
It's
earlier,
all
where it's like if you squish that intellectual curiosity, right, it's really about the baggage we bring to that. And it's
yeah,
similar in our place, right? It's not really about that person and their identity and how they live their life, because really that doesn't affect me at all.
yeah,
If this person
yeah,
is not binary, that means
yeah,
nothing to my life and how I live and how I operate. But I'm letting my discomfort get in the way, and I'm prioritizing my discomfort over their identity and how they live their life.
yeah,
And that's really what it
yeah,
comes down to.
yeah.
Well, another layer to that is and I've heard this in a lot of spaces. Another layer to that, because once you become a parent, it's not even about you anymore, right? It's
Mm,
about, what is my kid being exposed to? What is the danger of any given situation at all, anywhere, at any given moment to my child?
yeah.
And there are a lot of parents who either don't understand, they don't know enough about it,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's the fear of the unknown, and so I'm just
They fear
not
it.
going to expose my child to that at all. Or there are people who understand it and disagree with it
Mm,
for any number of reasons. The one I see the most, typically has to do with religion and the Bible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, but there are lots of reasons that people don't agree with it, and so it's interesting. Everything's always on a spectrum.
yeah.
It's it's interesting to me to see parents feel like the existence of the LGBTQIA identities in the human race as a threat
Mm,
somehow to their child.
mm-hmm.
With fear, yeah, fear
And
rather than
I've heard
understanding.
the argument, the worst one that I have heard, that I feel is just absolutely like irrelevant and unfair, is sexual predators. And I
Mm-hmm. Mm,
and I'm like, sexual predator is a whole other category of its own. Like, that is not have any correlation, or any, like, that has nothing to do with one or the other. A sexual predator is a sexual predator. They can be
right.
heterosexual, homosexual. They can be, I mean, there are such sexual predators who literally cannot be attracted to adults. They are only attracted to children.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like, I mean, I don't know I'm sure there's a name for that, but that's not hetero or homosexual. That's some other form of sexuality.
That's
And like,
pedophilia.
Pedophilia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
pedophilia. And so anyway, the
But that's a way
part,
of trying to demonize these communities, right?
yeah,
Because at its root, them just existing is fine.
Using
But
using the person's difference against them in a social way. I mean, that's junior high school stuff. As soon
also
as
using
kids
that,
become able to do that.
we talked about like that fear of unknown, that fear of difference. And
Yeah.
so
yeah,
instead of like, okay, I'm gonna learn and like not be ignorant about this, it's like, no, I'm gonna like make like it's gotta be bad. And so how can we make this worse? How can we make this
Yeah.
bad? Because
Yeah.
again, just
yeah,
their existence is not bad, but if they're sexual predators
Yeah.
and we're related to the children, nobody can argue with me there.
Yeah.
Nobody can say that I'm wrong for trying to protect my child from sexual
right,
who go
That's
after.
right.
right.
That's
Well,
been
and so let me
conflated.
ask you this. Let me ask you this. There's been a lot of questioning and, lash back with this topic being taught or talked about in schools, so by teachers, etc. What is your take on that? Because the argument is that this is a topic that should be only talked about by parents to their children,
Mm,
not through public education.
yeah. Well, here's the issue with that is that school, in my opinion, is meant to shape up little citizens, right? To become, active citizens in the world. And we're giving them the information that they need in order to thrive in society.
Preparation.
Period. That's what it is, right? We're giving them a basic foundation of how to thrive in society. Some of that is knowledge based, some of that's skills based. And so this idea that like, oh, it's my responsibility as a parent to talk about this and not the schools. Well, here's the issue with that. And it was the same issue and continues to be the same issue with sexual education, right?
Mm-hmm.
The issue with that is that now this becomes a societal thing that we need to address. And that's why we can't just leave it to parents, because there are some parents who will talk about it and who will address it. And there are some parents who don't have the tools, who don't have the knowledge, who don't have the words. They're not teachers, right? Like not in that to talk about some of these things. So we just can't leave it in the air, right? We like in the same way that like kids will be figuring out what's going on with their bodies hormonally as they go through puberty and need to understand what that looks like and how to interact and how to grapple with that and at least have a foundation in which to learn more about. Same thing with gender identity. Same thing with pronouns. This is something that they need to decide for themselves at some point. And they need to have, again, age appropriate, but they need to have information about how to do that. And at the end of the day, there always will be people who, for example, hit puberty earlier and maybe start being sexually active earlier. And so we can't just leave it up to the parents to decide if and when they will talk about this, because again, this becomes a public issue where we're not equipping little citizens to be full citizens. And it's the same with gender identity. It's the same with pronouns and anything that falls under that realm, in that they will be grappling with this. They will be trying to figure out, even if they're not trans, even if they're not non-binary, what kind of girl they want to be. Are they the girl that plays sports? Are they the girl that never wears dresses? Are they the girl that loves pink and like gets their nails done? They're deciding what kind of people they want to be. And that includes gender identity. And so for schools to not equip them with anything related to that leaves them worse off than better off. Period.
Yeah.
And if you're a parent that feels like, yes, like this is my responsibility to teach and like I want to make sure to do that, nobody takes that away if the school does it. In fact, these kids come home saying, this is what I heard from my teacher, and you get a chance to correct that, and or you already have told your kid about this, and they already have places in which to contribute to this conversation at school. So if that's how you really feel as a parent, continue feeling that way, but that role is not taken away from you if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. And there's still having been on a school board, there are avenues for that. You may be frustrated, but if your kids are learning something at school that you feel is inappropriate, then you can talk to the teacher, you can talk to the principal, then you can talk to the board. You go up the ladder and get and you be an activist and you get other parents like feeling, and you let the school know what the prevailing attitudes of the community are. The school will generally try very hard to reflect the community that it's in.
And that's how we ban books. So we see that works.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of times it's one parent. It's it's a democracy and it's imperfect. And a lot of times 2 or 3 parents will try to skew a school board one way or another. And that's an unfortunate feature of the system. But you do, as a parent, have the ability to have some influence on that. As society changes, there's going to be growing pains as we get these things changed. These things don't change in a decade.
Exactly.
They take generations. It's unfortunately a bit of a battle. Yeah.
And what I will say too about that is that we as caregivers, and I'm sure parents know this as well, is that children, especially this day and age where, children have free access to the internet and YouTube and phones and computers and all sorts of things. But even before then, kids will tell each other about various things. And so of like kids won't learn it if the school doesn't teach it. We know that not to be true. Yeah. We know kids are freely sharing information with each other. And so again, the parent wants to control what your child is learning, you have to take that active role in telling them what they need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're
probably That's probably the big change, is it requires a parent now. It used to be when the flow of information was not so free, it was pretty easy to keep track of what your kids were exposed to. And that's just not the case anymore unless you keep them at home and away from the television and the internet.
Well,
It
but even
requires
then,
that
I
you
mean, I
guide.
know before the internet was commonplace, like dated guys who would tell me like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, my best friend when I was 10 stole his dad's magazine and we would look at it together during
Yeah,
sleepovers, like
absolutely.
people have always had access to private things, and kids
Age
like V.
inappropriate information.
Yeah, and like V was saying, like kids are going to share stuff with each other. Like if one kid in the
Yep.
friend group got access to anything, like they're all going to just swarm and be like, oh my God, what'd you get? What'd and they're
Makes
going
you
to
the
look
cool
at it.
kid. Yeah.
And it is the only, you know, cure or solution to making sure your kid learns and is prepared for the real world when faced with those situations is that you have to be a proactive parent and discuss it with them at home. And you have to do it more than once. Like
That's right.
the talk, like when people talk about like everyone gets the talk, it's like the talk is a series of many smaller talks over many years, talking
Mm-hmm.
to your children at different ages about the ins and outs of what sex is and what
Yep.
relationships are and how to find a
And their
good
body.
partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like not even like intercourse, but just your hormonal, like puberty, like what's going to happen inside of your body as you get
Mm-hmm.
older, and your
Mm-hmm.
body's going to change in those things. Like if you want your child to learn those things in a specific way, you have to be the teacher. You have to educate yourself, and you have to have those talks at home, because they're going to get exposed to it, whether it's at school, out at a concert with their friends, at the playground when they're 9 years old. Like they're going to run into human beings who have different experiences than your experience, and your job is to prepare them
Best you can.
to receive information, process information, and come out the other side, in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate to
Yeah.
put it in a judgy kind of way, but that is the challenge as we go forward with more information and more exposure to the world, whether it's before you get out of school, like if you want to homeschool, or after. You have to exercise your leverage as a parent, as being that authority figure from birth. While their friends tell them things, mom and dad theoretically have more wisdom and more influence, and can counter that, but it's time consuming. It's a lot of work. You got to be present there for your kids when the conversation comes up. You just can't say, hey, let's meet at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning and talk about sex for an hour.
Well,
It
and
happens over the dinner table or whatever. It's
you've got to have the relationship too. If you as a parent, let me
yeah,
just put this in big bold letters. If you as a parent want to create and maintain influence over your children more so than their peers as they get older, and have children who trust you and trust your family values, and even though they're gonna stumble and make mistakes and find their own identity along the way, if you want your children to trust in you and trust in what you're teaching them, as an overall good human being trying to do good in the world, you
their
have to
interests.
start building that trust and relationship when they are born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to listen when your baby says, I want the green cup over the blue cup. You have to listen to them when they come to you with the small, tiny, and seemingly insignificant things that don't matter to adults because we've outgrown all of that shit. But to them,
Yeah.
it's the most important thing in the world in that moment.
Yeah.
And if you don't start then when they're 15, they're not going to want jack shit to do with you or your opinions.
Start with the little things. You got to show them, I think you got to show them how what you're doing is in their best interest. You have to, I mean, that's part of a loving relationship is I value you as much or more here than I do myself. And so that's why I'm doing this, and be able to take the time to make them understand that, even if you're wrong. And let them point out, it's not, that ain't working out the way you thought it was, Dad, and here's why. And it's the back and forth. It's the relationship, like you say. You gotta do that, and trying to start it when they're 15 or 18 or 26. And that's a tough row to hoe. Much easier to start when they're 2 or before.
And another thing I want to add to this is that, like, it's true that there's a lot of pressure to be a parent, right? And a lot of pressure to be the perfect. And so many parents are grappling with this idea of like feeling like they're always constantly falling short. Hearing conversations like this, it's like, oh, it's another thing now that I have to do, and now be perfect. But what I want to say too is that it's okay when a child asks you a question of any age, asks you a question, and you don't have the answer to say, I don't know.
Let me think about that a minute.
We're required to be perfect. We're required to be all-knowing, especially as parents, but in general. And so when your child comes to you and you're like, actually, I don't know. Or you know what? I don't have a lot of information about that. This is not something that I've grappled with a lot. Let me look it up and get back to you. Let's look it up together. Let's explore it together.
Let's look it up together. Huge.
So you can say, I don't know. And that's okay. You're human. You are not perfect. You are not the know-all be-all. You don't have an infinite amount of wisdom. You are not Google. You are not Bing, right? But you can go to Google and Bing together.
Another way you fall short. You're not Google. You're not Bing.
Well, and your kids will respect you so much more when you show them your imperfection. When you show them, I don't know everything. Let's go read about it together and have a discussion where you get to have opinions and thoughts, and I get to have opinions and thoughts, and we come around together and learn it together versus I'm the parent, you're the child. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen parents just shut down a conversation because they don't know the answer.
Yeah, because I told
so
you
threatened.
so.
They're so threatened by their own lack of knowledge that, and it is, it's scary because you have this human that you're now responsible for. And there's so much pressure from everywhere to be perfect, and to raise your kids right and blah, 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 blah. But the more you show your children your humanness and your imperfection and admit it and own it, and then you're like, let's look at this together, man, that kid is going to trust you. That kid is going to respect you. And they are going to feel like that's another mask they don't have to wear either. I can come to you, my parent, with my imperfections and my mistakes.
And get the straight poop.
You're perfect. When they're imperfect, they don't feel afraid to come to you.
That's right. Yep. Everybody on social media, all that stuff, everybody's perfect. And when they get an authentic response, about, hey, there's something we don't know, let's figure it out. Here's what I think, having a few more years experience, but working through it and learning, tremendous value. And that's going to be completely threatening to the autocratic, or we had some terms. You had a grid. I need a graphic to throw up here. The authoritarian parent.
Authoritarian.
You got to keep in mind progress over perfection. There is nothing perfect in the world. If you're afraid of having that conversation, try it once and see how it works out. And if it doesn't work out the first time, try it 12 or 15 more times before you decide it's not your approach. One of them will take. Nobody. If you're switching methods, your kids aren't going to buy it. They're just going to wonder what's up. Why'd you respond that way? But if you keep at it, it will change your relationship to be a little more conversational. And it doesn't have to be perfectly conversational. It just a little better next week, next time.
And there was something Jenny said earlier about paying attention to if the kid wants the blue cup or the green cup. And I think that's really important. That idea of listening to kids and what we see is what should be innocuous things that we see as big things, again, because of the baggage we bring in. And I say this in
Yeah.
relation to the way kids, again, they're shaping up their own gender identities as they go.
Yeah.
Sometimes they decide that the gender identity that they were assigned does not fit.
I don't fit. Yeah.
And parents really grapple, like have an issue with grappling with that, because two things happen. One, the image of the little boy or the little girl that they have in their head, they think is gone. And they don't know how to reconcile
Yeah.
that. They want to keep that child within that image.
Yeah.
And there's that element of, I want to protect my kid from what could come. Like if if the boy is picking the pink cup, then maybe he's gay and he's going to be persecuted for being gay. And this is going to be the worst thing ever. And I just,
Oh God. Yeah.
right.
Protection would be hard to overcome. If you're doing it in the name of you think you're protecting your kid.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell to get a parent to change if they think what they're doing is protecting their child. Yeah.
Yeah. And what they don't realize is by them suppressing those things within their child, it's
Yeah.
causing more harm than protection.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
they think that they're, preparing for the world and protecting from the world. They're actually hurting themselves. They're being the first person that hurts that kid themselves, because they're
That
repressing.
rejects them. Yeah.
So the two big things that I want to point out about what we see early on with children, even before they hit puberty, around the way they want to dress or the way they want to present. Could it be related to their sexual identity later? Maybe, but it could just be related to how they want to express themselves in the moment. Kids say they're dinosaurs all the time, and we let them have a little dino moment. And then if they grow out of it,
That's right.
and if they don't, now they're obsessed with dinosaurs and become some sort of paleontologist,
Yeah.
And
Right.
we have to do the
Yes.
same gender, where we embrace and try to learn about as much as possible and try to let them explore the world as much as possible and figure themselves out. And sometimes that looks like a boy wearing princess dresses. And it's not necessarily because his sisters do it or he's not feeling like there's enough space to be a boy in a household, but because that's how he's exploring the world in that moment. And the same with a girl who, is like, I don't want to wear pants and I don't feel like I'm a girl, and all these other girls. It could be that she just wants to be a tomboy. And it could be because she doesn't feel aligned in her body as a girl. But at the end of the day, we have to let that work itself out. And we have to provide a safe space for our kids to figure themselves out and work it out.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times, too, I think when the kids get a little older, what they're doing is they've fallen in with a group of people they like. They have friends
Mm-hmm.
or a peer group or something. And so they want to go try that on for a while.
Absolutely.
Sometimes as a parent, you just got to sit there and go, okay, Billy, yeah, you can play with your, Jennifer, share your Barbies with Billy,
Mm-hmm.
and just wait for it to pass. It's not locking anything in long term.
Yeah, exactly. Millennials talk all the time about our emo phase. I didn't have one, but a lot of folks around me did. And again, I out of that and decided to not be emo anymore. And sometimes now they embrace the dark side for the rest of their lives. Like, we just have to let them figure it out.
Yeah.
We can't, and I will say too that it's really easy for parents to be like, oh, it's a phase. You can feel that way in your heart, but I would advise against saying to the kid, yeah, this is just your emo phase. You're
Don't
not.
be dismissive. Yeah.
Yes, dismissing
That's
someone's current
patronizing.
identity.
Yeah. Let them embrace. And that includes with their gender identity. Let them play with it. Let them embrace. If people looking at them crazy, that's them people's problem. That's not your kids.
Yeah.
And don't make it.
That's right.
Don't let your discomfort around what people might say or what people might think, again, limit your child and hurt your child. Because your child, not them.
That's another good point, is your job is to protect. If you're going to be protective about your kids, it needs to be you protecting your kids, not from the neighbors. It's about, hey, leave my kid alone.
Exactly.
He wanted pink hair. Leave him alone. He's figuring things out.
You go mind your business and let my kid be a kid.
Yeah, that's right. He's a kid. When he's 27, then we can figure it's taking. But up till then, they're not fully formed.
I had a conversation with a really close friend of mine, and she, I don't even remember how we got on the topic about the trans community, and what were we talking? Oh, she was I don't know how we got on the topic, but she was talking about how a lot of times like people get so worried when their young children, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds are wanting, and specifically the situation where a boy wants to dress up like a girl, and just like losing their minds or freaking out and not knowing what to do. And oh my God, he wants to dress up in the princess dresses. And my friend goes, it's not, sometimes it's the dress. I've taken care of young boys before who love the color pink, and they would just, and their sister's clothes are all pink, so they want to wear their sister's clothes.
That's
if
right.
you bought him a pink boy shirt, then he would wear that. Like he wants to wear his sister's clothes because he doesn't have anything in that color. But
he's seen something that makes him curious. He has to satisfy curiosity.
Yeah, or something someone else has that he doesn't have. Why don't I have it? I want to try that.
Yeah.
Like it's just normal human behavior. But the idea that, a boy and he has a sister and she has a friend over and they're playing princess dress up and he says, I want to play dress up. It could just be that he wants to play dress up, not that he wants to dress like a princess. But those are maybe princess clothes are the only dress up clothes in the house. So
that's what's
ask
handy.
him, do you want to dress up like a princess? Do you want to dress up like a cowboy or an astronaut or a doctor or there are so many kinds of kids dress up clothes, and it might be that my sister plays dress up with princesses and I want to be included. So yes, I want to go dress up like a princess with them. Or it could be, I want to go get some dress up clothes to play with too.
Yeah.
Everyone makes believe and plays pretend.
Also, as a person who wears dresses, do you know how freeing it is to wear a dress? And men don't do that. Boys don't get to do that unless they're Scottish and they have a cute thing. But
I was going to say, let's let them be naked while go commando while they do it.
You see what I mean? Like how free if we allowed men to do that, right? It was like, no, you can't be a man, or certainly not a straight dresses. How freeing is that? So of course this boy wants to put on this dress and like spin around in it because that looks fun. That feels freeing. That feels like fun. And it still is. When you're an adult, you're just told that you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah. Well, and who decided, like what overarching governing body decided that this piece of cloth means girl and this piece of cloth means boy? Like that's all. It's just cloth cut into different shapes.
Yeah,
I know. And it's social, it's social acceptance, and it's group think. It's group think and acceptance. And if you're outside the norm, then you're to be feared. It's weird. We're misunderstood. Then we're scared of you.
For our kids, we want our kids to be normal. We want them to be balanced. We want them to like not have adversity, like just ease through the world. And that's unrealistic. We just know, like, no matter how much
happen.
It's not a thing. It's not a thing. Yeah. We all have our everything everywhere all at once, if you will, where we have things that we're dealing with, we're sorting through, we're figuring out, and we just cannot literally protect them from everything. We cannot stop them from experiencing the things. What we can do is prepare them to make good decisions. We can teach them early on to trust themselves, right? And not trust society, because that's a big piece. If you have a confident child who can make good decisions for themselves, if they can trust themselves, if they know who to listen to, and the to is me. Right?
Show them alternatives. You teach them to be coachable, right? Okay, here's something you're doing. I mean, if you're learning a job, on-the-job training, or learning a skill, how to build a fire with a couple of sticks, it's like, I see what you're doing there. Here, maybe try this. Be open to alternatives. Be open to another experience here. If you tie a string here and do this, then that works better, and just it makes life easier. We're not trying to indoctrinate you here. We're just trying to show you how things work easier, better for you,
Right. But if we teach kids early on, like girls don't start the fire. Only boys do. Only men can start the fire. Maybe they feel like they're really good at that. Maybe they have a good interest in starting the fire. And now they're suppressed. They don't trust themselves anymore because what they thought they might be good at, what they wanted to try, girls don't do that. And she also starts to not trust herself either, right? Like, there's that big element of when we start to gender certain things and what that looks like as far as individual expression, then kids very early on start not to trust what they feel or think, and they defer to whatever's considered normal or whatever in their community, in their homes, in their households. They're deferring to external expertise, and they're never trusting themselves. And that even includes their parents, right? Where they're not listening to what their parents are saying because they don't trust that either.
Yeah.
Because conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have Dad and I this is a while ago, got into a really great argument about bathrooms. It's a very logistical argument. It was not about the
How
like
many genders are
moral.
there?
It was about the logistics of how many bathrooms do we need, and how economical, or like, can we expect businesses to spend the money to install how many bathrooms are necessary to appease every identity. It was not an argument about like the morality of a transgendered woman using the women's bathroom or a transgendered man using the men's bathroom. It wasn't about that. It was more about
it was pragmatic. Having done a few capital projects, right? The people build buildings, and right now there are two I'm going to say bathrooms are constructed on the basis of sex, generally male and female, and then there's some other category, right? Like some of the societies, but a bathroom's an expensive piece of a building to build, and if we go to gendered bathrooms, and there are 62 officially recognized somewhere. I think I saw somewhere, I don't know who was recognizing them. No contractor is going to build a building with 62 bathrooms on every floor, right? So where's the line? How far does society accommodate this, or do we? I think Jennifer's solution was everything's unisex, right? They're just individual ones. But if people are uncomfortable about going into a bathroom labeled other than their gender,
individual bathrooms was my solution, not big bathrooms with multiple stalls.
Okay.
So, my
where's it going to go?
Is unpopular, but I think in general, we should have a big gender neutral bathroom with stalls, no urinals, and then maybe a handful of family bathrooms where you could like change. We have change stations and whatever, but they're all the singular bathrooms, if you will, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't understand. And let me add a caveat here: gender neutral bathroom with the family bathroom with the changing station, but European style stalls, because I don't understand why American style stalls have the gap where you can like see in there. Like, what is that about?
Yeah,
like fully closing, locking stalls.
So if we have European style stalls where you go in there and you can't peek in, and goes all the way gender neutral stalls, period. Because when I come to wash my hands, like I'm fully clothed, like I'm not doing anything crazy. Ministry shouldn't be taboo. So if I need to come out and like get a pad, and like that should be in the bathroom, even in gender neutral bathrooms, this is just bodily function. And then we have separate bathrooms for stalls in which like maybe you want some privacy, maybe you need to change the baby or do something as a family. So you have those family stalls that anybody could use, but there's that. Boom, everybody's catered to. And at the end of the day, get over yourself. Like, I really do feel that way. Like, you're in a closed stall. What's the problem here? When you go out to wash your hands, everybody's washing their hands fully clothed. What's the problem here?
I could see if this was like even in the daytime, I could see the argument being that what if, not all bathrooms in all buildings at all times are like filled with people where you would feel safe and like there's lots of people around. You might be a woman who goes into one of those gender neutral bathrooms, even though it has separate stalls, and it's you and another man alone in that room, technically, that's separated. And I mean, there's even for me, my thought process in that is that I would leave that bathroom. I would not stay in that bathroom. I don't care who that man is. I would not stay in a bathroom alone in an enclosed space with a strange man alone, because of obvious
especially if he's
reasons.
dressed differently or something that you're not used to out of your experience. If he's dressed like a princess still, right? From childhood, I think that's the fear. Is he now you associate him with being a sexual predator or somehow off?
It would
For
me it wouldn't matter how he's dressed. If I can tell that is a man with a penis,
a biological male,
or what you think?
As far as I know, right? Yeah. Then I'm leaving that bathroom. Someone who is more powerful than me that could harm me in that way, I'm leaving that bathroom.
Well, here's my answer to that is that that could happen. So the sign on the door that says women is not going to stop a man from going into that bathroom.
Exactly.
So what I'm saying is that in this scenario that I'm proposing, where there are these gender neutral bathrooms, and then you have these kind of singular, which we see in malls sometimes, where you have like a singular stall.
Yeah.
Like if late at night and you're like, I don't know who's in that bathroom, then you go in the single stall and you're good. But the sign itself that says woman doesn't stop a man from coming into the bathroom. And if he were to want to do something to you, that sign is not going to stop. Oh, well, that says women. Now I can't assault her.
Especially if there's a predator watching for a woman going into the bathroom alone.
Yeah, that sign means nothing. And honestly, at the end of the day, we look at it that way. It's like, well, there's that separation, and it's designed that way, and everybody's going to follow that. When we talk about criminals and sexual predators and those sort of folks, the sign isn't going to stop them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the reality. I was at a Waffle House just last week, and they had two little bathrooms, and they were trying to accommodate, and they had a little, the little international symbol for a woman, a silhouette with a skirt and a silhouette of pants, and then a third one next to it it was a skirt on one side and pants on the other. It was and it made me laugh because they are doing what they can to accommodate anybody, but it's still biological gender based. It's still, and so a person that's non-binary, technically there's not really a thing there for, well, I don't know. I guess it depends on how you interpret that third symbol. It's just going to be, we started off talking about historical handling of dress and gender and what's criminal. And, it's just, we're doing it again in America. It's going to take a while. It's fun to have these discussions, not being, it doesn't affect me that much. I understand the suffering of people who are figuring it out or caught in the middle for one reason or another, and how it's so pervasive. It's got to be a pain in the butt navigating the world where you don't fit, into you don't have a nice little sign up with identifying you.
There's this one comic that I'm thinking of. I want to say that the artist goes under webcomic. I will follow up and let y'all know so that way you can put it in the show notes or something. But I love this one in particular around this conversation because the first image is a woman in a figure in a dress and a figure in pants. And let me start off. Webcomics, they start off with this image kind of speaking in with these two figures, and they say, you must clothe yourself at all times to protect your genitals. The next image,
okay,
one is in the dress, one is in pants, and it's like, but you also must wear clothing that signals your genitalia.
Yeah, see, that's exactly where it goes.
Because at the end of the day, we're literally we can't be naked because that's offensive and people can see our genitalia. But again, when we talk about gender clothing, it's really about signaling what? Genitalia.
Yeah. Because we're visual. I remember back in the day thinking everybody needed a sign tattooed on their forehead announcing mental illnesses, anything that's going to affect how you want someone to treat you when they walk up to you. Well, you just need to wear a sign, that advertises all that stuff. Everybody should have a sign, and that people don't necessarily want that to. That's not a comfortable thing for everybody, letting it all hang out, and people hide things. People aren't proud of things. It's tough judging people by appearances, but a lot of times that's all you have at first glance. It's
And I
tough.
think
It's a tough problem.
to be honest, like, even if we had that sign, right, that's like, oh, I'm this and that, like, then it's up to Jenny's interpretation of what. So for example, if I got a sign that says I'm a cis Black woman, it's up to Jenny
Yeah,
to decide what she feels Blackness is, and she
yeah,
doesn't
Right.
explore to me what my Blackness is and how it
that's
manifests.
right. That's right.
So it takes away all the fun of getting to know somebody. And when we come back
Right.
full circle about really having this intellectual curiosity about who people are and what their
Yeah,
lived experience is and how they move through the world. My bipolar and your bipolar don't look the same.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
And somebody
Mm-hmm.
else's Blackness don't look the same. Right? My womanness and Jenny's womanness don't look the same.
That's
So
right.
this approaching an individual as an individual and letting them reveal themselves as to who they are and how they operate through the world. That's what we need. Because I can put anything on this sign,
Ooh.
but getting to know me for who I really am.
Yeah.
My frailties, my pluses, my minuses, my strengths. That's the fun of it. And that's how we have to approach people. Because if we only approach people what we think we know about them, that's where we get in trouble.
We want to know everything
Snap,
about
snap,
them
snap,
based
snap.
upon what stall they walk into, as opposed to actually FaceTime getting to know people. It's like, I wonder if that's kind of people are not as neighborly, people are not as in person as they used to be, is the root of all this. And so now we want signs, we want dress, we want to know at a glance. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, sorry, honey, you just got to get to know people.
Well, yeah, everyone just wants to be able to judge the book by its cover and move on. They
Yeah,
don't want to take the
yeah,
time to actually build a relationship with somebody, or even just ask a few questions, have a conversation, and then decide if you're going to move forward into relationship or not,
yeah. Your idea of blackness doesn't match my idea of blackness, and furthermore, you're Black and I'm not, but that's not going to change my mind. And so I'm going to go find a group of people that, people get upset about things they have no knowledge of at
Yeah.
all, you know, and without an actual relationship with a person that you want to continue, they don't have to. They can just go back to their cave.
I think V, you said it really beautifully just a second ago, and I think that the simplest summation of this episode is to replace judgment with curiosity, just in every way that you can, no matter what situation you're approaching in life, whether it's transgender issues, whether it's how to raise your kid, whether it's what job you want to do, like whatever life is throwing at you, put aside judgment and replace it with curiosity.
Yeah.
What's going on here? How can I look at this? How can I approach this? What am I missing? And just ask questions instead of passing judgments based on old paradigms or old experiences or things someone told you when you were 5. Like just put it down. Put it down and ask questions.
Don't worry about being perfect. Just worrying about accomplishing the mission, task oriented. Am I preparing them for the world?
Yeah.
We should have it should be the relational peopling podcast instead of the relational parenting podcast.
If kids are people, then it already is. We just need to change the branding.
Right? Relational peopling podcast. There's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was such a wonderful conversation, and I always really enjoy kind of the perspective that you both bring and the way in which conversation just shapes up. So thank you again.
Yeah,
You bet.
thank you. We appreciate you coming back for a second round with us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us. So
I think
you have a great perspective.
Yeah, I've got to give you props too, because I feel like these are two of the most heavily charged social issues today. And so for you to be out there teaching others and changing the culture and bringing inclusivity wherever you go, and then to come on here and publicly discuss all of the things takes balls and bravery. And I just really appreciate you. Yeah.
Out there fighting a good fight, making the world a better place.
I'm trying. I really am.
Yeah.
Doing my part.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, happy parenting and good luck out there. Well, did you learn anything new? Or have you heard all of this before? Do you agree with us, disagree with us, have a question? We want to see you in our inbox or via the Patreon page in the show notes. Tap on either link to send us your feedback, share your own parenting story, or support our mission of providing a connected community for all parents. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you loved this episode, click on that little star and give us 5 of them so we can get visible to other parents who are looking for us. This is your weekly reminder. Parents, you already have everything you need inside of you. You are a strong, loving, capable parent. And here, you are never alone. I'll see you next week.